in the process of laying the foundation for its own defeat. And if it doesn't make some changes very quickly, they're going to lose this war. Now, on the surface, that sounds ridiculous, because the disparity between the power between the Israeli side and the Hamas side it's off the charts. It's off the table. Israel has a powerful air force. It's got allies. It's got industry. It's got a navy. I mean, it's got a large modern force, intelligence, bombs, everything, all this stuff. And on the other side, Hamas is enclosed within a small area. They don't have an air force. They only have some very rickety bombs that hardly ever actually strike targets in Israel anymore. They don't have any ability to reinforce themselves. You know, they don't have medical support. They can hardly even find food and water. So you would look at it and you'd say there's really no way that, of course, Israel is going to win. The thing is, though, wars are not won at the tactical level. Wars are won on the strategic level. And it is possible to win every battle on the tactical level and lose the war. We certainly have some experience with that. Look at Vietnam and Afghanistan. We never lost any battles in there, and we lost both of those wars. Israel is in a similar situation here, and if without changes, I think that's where they're heading. And I'm going to show you why. Now, a couple of days ago, it was earlier today, on Sky News, the Israeli ambassador to the UK went on to explain Israel's position, and the intent was to bolster Western resolve, to get the support that they're supposed to have, or that they want, so that they can continue this operation and maintain the support of the West, which is vital for both political, social, and military reasons. They need to maintain the support from the West so that they can continue the operation. Now, it's important to point out that before we show you the first of these, the clips from this interview, is that Netanyahu's stated political objective, the ultimate objective of the operation, is to bring peace and security to the people of Israel. That's what the war is intended to do, because obviously on October 7th, they didn't have it. And so now then he wants to put it in a position to get it. Now that makes sense. That's reasonable. And that's proper. That's appropriate for any government to try and bring peace and security to its people. The problem comes in how they go about doing it. And that has everything to do with whether you're going to succeed or not. Now, first of all, let's look at this at the first exchange here between the Sky News reporter and the Israeli diplomat, when she's trying to explain what the Israel side wants.
Israel is doing everything to prevent casualties.
But he says American presidents choose their words very carefully on this issue. Indiscriminate means random, without care. He is saying you are bombing Gaza without care.
Absolutely not. And you know what? Let's just see history. Americans were fighting ISIS in Mosul. You had much more people that got killed in Mosul proportionally than the people in Gaza. And another thing, when you're thinking about the amount of efforts Israel is doing, we're talking about designated places to the Palestinians to hide. We're talking about humanitarian aid. Do you remember, by the way, do you remember a case?
On this point,
Mark, I'm asking you a question. Do you remember a case that any country in the world created humanitarian corridor to the enemy? I don't remember you helping Nazi Germany during the war, and I don't remember Americans helping Japanese during the Second World War.
The point I'm trying to make.
Put it in proportions.
Right.
Okay, so first of all, all that last stuff she was saying was just wrong, because the United States did a lot to help the people of Germany and Japan and tried to help them afterwards. And so, yeah, they actually did help them with humanitarian needs, quite a lot of it, as it turned out. But that's really neither here nor there. The first thing to notice here is the very combative aspect of this so-called diplomat. She's doing the very opposite of diplomacy, which is supposed to be to smooth things over, which is to be to get people to see your point of view, which is to get them to agree with you. Instead, she's lecturing this guy, and by extension, everybody in the West, especially the UK and in the United States, because those are the intended audience targets here. That's not helping your case, to talk down to everybody and to basically say, you screwed up and don't you dare question me. But let's get to the more specific things. She opened up that segment there and that question by being asked, is Israel being indiscriminate? Because that was the charge. And she says, absolutely not. There's no way we're being indiscriminate. But breaking news, we just have a report released just a little while ago CNN is reporting that nearly half of the Israeli munitions dropped on Gaza are imprecise dumb bombs, U.S. intelligence says. Okay, so that's a big issue right there, is that our intelligence is actually releasing this information that says, as it turns out when you read the article, somewhere around 40% of the bombs that have been dropped in this war have been unguided bombs. Now, let me tell you the significance of that. That tells you one of two things and possibly both. One is it tells you you're not using precision type weapons because you don't want to be precise. You want to just cause as much damage and destruction as possible. And Gary, if you could throw some of that, does that look precise? See, this is exactly what you see on your screen right now when you see dumb bombs dropped, when you see unguided bombs. They're area weapons. They're not precise. And so Israel claiming that they are doing everything in their power to avoid civilian casualties is self-evidently untrue. Now, this is not just to beat up on Israel. This is to say what Israel is saying and what people can see with their own eyes on the ground, and now then they can see with intelligence from the United States, their best ally, is untrue. And that is important because it undermines the support without which Israel cannot continue this operation. So if they truly do want to win this war and bring peace to their people, this is not the way to go about doing it. But unfortunately, the problems don't stop there. In fact, they're about to be compounded here. Now, in a minute, I'm going to show you the interviewer asked the ambassador about something that Lloyd Austin said, U.S. Secretary of Defense. And in it, he said, well, let him talk for himself. Here's what he said a week or so ago.
It's kind of a fight. The center of gravity is the civilian population. And if you drive them into the arms of the enemy, you replace a tactical victory with a strategic defeat. So I have repeatedly made clear to Israel's leaders that protecting Palestinian civilians in Gaza is both a moral responsibility and a strategic imperative.
So when Mark, the interviewer, asked her this question, now you know what he's talking about. But here's how she responded to that.
Isn't the danger that, as Lloyd Austin, US Defense Secretary, says, you're in danger of turning a tactical victory into a strategic defeat? In other words, so many youths are going to be radicalized that they continue to fight against Israel?
Actually, the opposite, and I'm so pleased that you're asking this, because 2005 was the day that Israel left the Gaza Strip in order to give the Palestinians an opportunity to build a safe haven next to the sea. Gaza could have been a beautiful place, having industrial areas, having hotels, and beautiful, beautiful places. What Hamas turned this place in few months was to a place that uses his people as human shields.
Okay, what you notice there, if you're paying attention, she did not answer his question at all. He said there is a risk that this devastation and destruction is so great that you radicalize the entire population and a whole generation of people against you. And he said, how do you respond to that? She says, no, I think it's the opposite, meaning in direct relation to what he had asked, no, it's not going to radicalize. It's going to be the opposite of radicalization. And then she didn't even answer the question. She didn't say any reason why she thought that wouldn't happen. But folks, come on. What normal person can look at those images? Gary, bring some of those back up again. Let's reinforce this point here. What person can look at this level of destruction and say, this is not going to radicalize the population? When you now know for certain that there is at least some intentional purpose behind this, that you want to just wipe out whole portions of the city to make it unlivable. And you think that the people who are living this aren't going to be radicalized. Whatever level of anger and animosity that was against Israel prior to this, and it was pretty high, obviously that was what underscored the reason for Hamas taking some of the actions that it did, according to what they claim. But that is nothing. This is light years ahead of light years beyond what they had prior to 10/7. So the conditions now are going to be much worse, and it's self-evidently going to be so. If Israel is blinding themselves to this reality and they're going forward to try to set operational objectives, believing that somehow that this is not going to be the outcome, they're setting themselves up for disaster. And in fact, we see that that's where they're going, because when she was asked what their objectives were, she said this.
So, okay, you eradicate Hamas. There's a question about whether you can do that. eradicate an ideology.
We have no
but you
question,
get
by
rid
the
of,
way. We know we can do it.
All right. Well, you get rid of Hamas. What happens post-Hamas in Gaza? What happens to 2 million people in Gaza? What do you think should happen?
So I think the Israeli government's vision at the moment is, in order to have a better future both to the Palestinians and to the Israelis, Gaza must be demilitarized and Gaza must be de-radicalized. So this is the two things, the two pillars.
So let me break that down for you. De-radicalize and demilitarize. That means all the weapons taken away. That means all of the ability to the people to defend themselves be removed and de-radicalized. And if that sounds familiar to you, it should, because that's the same thing that China is saying about the Uyghurs in their country, which we call genocide. They are putting them in camps and re-educating them. That's another really bad term that we've heard from the past. And you understand what that means. They're trying to tell them, no, all these things you see around you, all this destruction, all the deaths of your family members and your friends, just forget about all that and don't be radical anymore. That is nonsensical. What person could actually think that that would be the outcome, that they'll succeed at that task? Because, folks, that's what's necessary to bring peace to Israel. You have to get the Palestinian side to be passive, to be willing to cooperate, to not want to have violence in their actions, to want to solve problems with violence. That's the way you can bring peace. Without that, there is no possibility for peace. And yet, Israel is pursuing something that's antithetical to that very outcome. The methods they're using to try to bring peace are only going to bring more violence. I mean, it's just self-evident. This is not hard stuff. It's self-evident, but people are not being willing to call this out for what it is. And listen, as I'm going to say many times here, I am definitely pro-Israel. I want them to have peace. I want them to be able to live in security. I want the same thing for the Palestinian people, though, too. If you don't have peace for both, you have peace for neither. Let's be clear on this point. If Israel and Palestinians both don't have peace, neither one are going to have peace. That's a fact. Whether anyone likes it or not, whether anyone wishes it were different, it's not, and it won't be. And the longer they keep going down this path of ignoring that fundamental reality, the farther away they're going to get for peace. Unfortunately, we get yet another level of problems, because when asked what the ultimate objective was and what the post-war situation is supposed to look like, things took another turn.
Is there still a chance for a two-state solution?
I think it's about time for the world to realize the Oslo paradigm failed on the 7th of October, and we need to build a new one. And in order to build a new one...
Does that new one include the Palestinians living in a state of their own? Is that what it includes?
I think the biggest question is, what type of Palestinians are on the other side? This is what Israel realized on the 7th of October. The answer is absolutely no, and I'll tell you why.
Well, then
because
how can there be peace?
The reason there is no peace
Israel
is because the Palestinians...
without offering
Mark,
a state to Palestine, how can there be peace in Israel?
You see, to his credit, he actually would not let her get by with not answering the question again. He says, what do you mean there's no two-state solution? How do you expect anyone to live in peace when they're never going to be allowed to live in freedom? And of course, she was just belligerent. She was in his face, so frustrated that he wasn't allowing her to say whatever she wanted. And look, you can get by with that in an interview. You can get by with that, and you could eventually just, bludgeon the guy with words and silence him, and he'll end up being quiet. But that doesn't change the reality. You're pursuing something that can't be accomplished. And look, this is now putting them at odds with the United States, because President Biden has been very clear for a long time now that this is what he expects of a solution.
I made it clear to the Israelis that, to Bibi and to his war cabinet, that I think the only ultimate answer here is a two-state solution that's real.
Now, he said that many times, and even in recent days, he's repeated that he's looking for a two-state solution, that there has to at least be a path. There has to be some kind of valid path. But you see that right now, Israel is not even listening. They're saying, no, absolutely not. She didn't even hide that. When finally pressed, she said, absolutely not. So you have the president of the United States, who's giving enormous political, diplomatic, military, and financial support to Israel, without which they cannot prosecute this war. And they're saying, don't care what you say. this is what we're going to do. We are not going to do what you're going to ask. Now, if you need that reinforced anymore, he said that we have told Bibi and his war cabinet, Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said that we want a two-state solution. But here's what Netanyahu is saying, and he's saying this on screen, on television to some of his soldiers, but I assure you, some of his target audience is right here in Washington, D.C.
שום דבר לא יעצור אותנו. אנחנו הולכים עד הסוף, עד הניצחון. לא פחות מזה. אולי לנו יום קשה מאוד, וכל יום יש לנו בנים יקרים שנופלים. ועם זאת אני רוצה להגיד בצורה הברורה ביותר, מה שאמרתי עכשיו, כמפקד בשטח. אנחנו ממשיכים עד הסוף. אין בכלל שאלה כזאת. ואני אומר את זה גם נוכח הכאב הגדול, אבל גם מול הלחצים הבינלאומיים. שום דבר לא יעצור אותנו. אנחנו הולכים עד הסוף, עד הניצחון. לא פחות מזה.
What victory? What victory are you talking about? You're going to go all the way to victory. What does that even look like? I mean, I wish he was telling his military men what victory looks like. And that, by the way, is supposed to be an obligation for the political leadership to give a specific requirement to the military, a military attainable objective, so that you can actually, with brute force, go and accomplish a political objective. That's what wars are supposed to be about. But let's look at that on the military level that Netanyahu claims he's trying to get at. He wants to destroy Hamas. You've probably heard that 100 times, so that Israel can live in peace. But who is Hamas? How will any of his IDF soldiers be able to say inside the Gaza Strip, in the Khan Yunis area especially, which is densely populated, how do they know that that man over there is a Hamas fighter, or is he just an angry man whose family you just killed? I mean, how can you tell the difference? The answer is you can't. Look, I've seen this firsthand myself. I remember on one of my tours into the southern part of Afghanistan, not far from Kandahar, I was on a patrol with a group one time, and there was a farm out there, and we were on an outpost, and we could see a group of, I think it was 5 black-clad people in a wheat field, it looked like. And we could see them from about here up, and they're just watching us. And, you know, and I'm looking at the guys, I'm like, are they Taliban? I mean, they kind of look like it. And they said, well, maybe, but they also are just farmers. This area is a farming area. They could just be farmers. We don't have any idea. They may just be looking at us because we're here, or it could be Taliban guys plotting to come and get us when the sun goes down. We had no way to know, but we have rules of engagement. And so we can't say, well, they might be Taliban, shoot them all. We don't do that. That's not the way America works. And that's not the way it works if you even want to have a chance to actually live in peace afterwards with those people. Now, that's what Israel is not doing. They're not being discriminated. They are, as you can see from all of these shots that we keep showing, that you see on the news every day, they're just blowing up entire buildings, entire apartment complexes we've shown in a previous one here. There's self-evidently no military value there. They're just blowing it up. Whoever's inside is dead, and that's it. That's not discriminate. That is not effective. And so you cannot, let me reiterate this, you cannot achieve a tactical victory when you don't even know who the enemy is. And if you just kill every man, you are going to lose the support of the West. And I mean in large numbers. Now that's already happening because people in America are already starting to say, hey, this is just not right. You even have the president and many of his party members are actually starting to say, hey, this just isn't right. And for them to even question this, in the first part, they wouldn't question anything. Now they're asking questions. But in Europe, they're doing a lot more than asking questions. They're starting to take some action already, as evidenced by what the Prime Minister of Ireland recently said.
Ireland is calling for a ceasefire, and you'll have seen at the UN the other day, 17 out of 27 member states here in the European Union now calling for a ceasefire, leading to a new peace process and Palestinian statehood, which is the only way to secure justice and security for everyone living in the region. I think the European Union has lost credibility because of our inability to take a stronger and more united position on Israel and Palestine. We've lost credibility with the global south, which actually is most of the world, because what is perceived to be double standards, and there's some truth in that, quite frankly.
Now that's where we are right now on December the 14th of 2023. And there have been somewhere around 20,000 innocent Palestinian people who have died. Some of those are Hamas, maybe even several thousand. Israel claims 7. Okay, for purposes here, let's just say that they're 100% right, and that there are then now somewhere around 12, 13,000 innocent people that have been killed. We'll just use that number. We'll use their number for now. Give them the benefit of the doubt. But that is meaningless. That's irrelevant. There were 1,000 Israelis who were killed, over 1,000 Israelis who were killed on 10/7. They were butchered. In many cases, they were innocent civilians were killed in their homes in a concert. The most heinous attack you can even imagine. Israel is absolutely within its rights to go after the perpetrators of that attack. They not only deserve to it, they are encouraged to do so to bring peace to their people. They owe it to their population. What they don't owe to their population is to be so careless and broad in their application of violence that they impose 10 times the number of innocent deaths on another population. Look, whatever Hamas did, they deserve to be punished for it. They should be brought to justice, but not the tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians. And there's been somewhere around 50,000 wounded. And because you've destroyed a lot of the hospitals, because you've deprived them of medicines and of electricity and power, gas to power the engines and the turbines there, they can't even operate. So many of those people are going to die who shouldn't die. Many of them should be able to get hospital care and survive. They won't. So that number is going to go up. What happens when Israel then, with the situation you saw in Europe right now, with the situation in America right now, where we're starting to realize you're not being honest with us? What do you think that support's going to do when they go further south into Khan Yunis, where the population is even more dense? Now, according to Israel group there, they have killed 7,000 members of Hamas, but they still recommend or estimate there's between 15 and 20,000 more, meaning they're maybe a third of the way through. If the numbers hold consistent, are you telling me that Israel is going to be okay with killing another 40 to 50,000 Palestinian people? Is that what the number is? And I just can't imagine that anyone in the West is going to be okay with that. They're already starting to get to the high level. The UN General Assembly voted 153 to 10 for an immediate ceasefire because they're tired of all this. They're sickened by this images of these little kids that we keep saying in the Palestinian area that are paying the price for all of this. They don't deserve this. No child deserves this. And yet there's too many people, and now fewer of them, who are not troubled by that, but we should all be troubled by that. And listen, it is going to be really hard to go after the Hamas people who did the terrorist attack if you are discriminate, if you don't just level buildings. It will be a hard, long slog, and it will probably take, I bet it could take up to a year. I bet it could. It's a long time, and it would be very expensive in terms of troops and of materials. But if Israel is careful, if Israel is distinguished with what they're doing, and they actually use proper techniques like the United States did in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and for all the mistakes we made, we did a lot of things tactically right. But Israel is not right now. And if Israel wants peace, if Israel wants to get to a place
the line stretches back,
then it's going to have to make some changes. Because I'm telling you, even aside from the issue of whether they lose the support of the West, that's a secondary issue. It's a big one, but it's secondary. The most important issue is what's left on the ground when this war finally comes to an end, whenever that turns out to be. Because right now, Israel is digging themselves deep into a hole, and they are creating for themselves future strife that will dwarf 10/7. If you think 10/7 was bad, then you can't even imagine the long-term instability and violence that they are building up for themselves right now. Israel must change course if it wants to achieve peace. And I'll say again what I said at the first of this because it is so important. You can't miss this. If both the Palestinians and the Israelis don't get peace, then neither the Palestinians or the Israelis will have peace. It's both or neither. And it's not anyone's opinion. It's not anyone's preference. You don't get to choose this. It just is true. Because the Palestinians, no people are going to live in subjugation. No people, millions of them, There's 2 million in Palestine and another 3 million, I believe, in the West Bank. They are not going to live as subjects of a prison. They are not going to be pushed into a hole and said, you're going to be de-radicalized, you're going to be disarmed, you're not going to be able to defend yourself, and you're not going to have self-governance, ergo freedom. No one is going to live like that. The harder you push in that direction, the worse it's going to be, because they're going to view that violence is their only way out. Palestinians must have a valid path to some kind of hope for a future freedom that doesn't require violence. And if Israel doesn't give them that path, then violence is the only thing they're going to get. It's human nature, and it's self-evident. I want the Israeli people to be able to live in peace. I want the Palestinian people to be able to live in peace. And without some changes, and if that needs to come from the United States, then that's what we should do for our own interest and for our own morality. We should not continue to let the Israeli government say one thing, do something different. We see with our own eyes. We now see with our own intelligence service what the truth is. And if we don't do anything here, then we're going to be seen as complicit in what happens next. And I don't want to be complicit in undermining the security for the innocent Israeli civilians. That's the most important point to understand here. I care about the Israeli people, care about the Palestinian people. All of them can have peace if we change our path here. And that is your deep dive for today. See you next time.